special edition.
Oh, JT, how good is this, mate? Now, normally we have with our guests massive long intros about, in this case, it'd be like 10 Australian Opens, buddy, US, French, buddy, all these bullshit. This is an awesome human cutting through the crap, getting straight down to it. Today we have Danni Di Toro. Danni, how good is it for you right now being here on the Giddy Up podcast?
Pretty good, to be really honest. It's great to see your face. It's wicked to meet you, JT, and really good to see you doing some great stuff. Like at a time where we probably all need a little bit of joy in our lives, this is probably a really great contribution to that.
It is lovely to meet you, and of course you're locked down in beautiful Melbourne as well.
Been fun times.
Not for long. You'll be out and about and just rolling around the world. Now, Danni, I know that as soon as I start talking to people and I'm going to mention you, and they go, there's a million things run through their mind, and then I just throw them at this one. Remember that brick wall that fell on that girl at Dandenong at the swimming pool? And they go, yeah. And then all of a sudden they're just trying to, but didn't she play tennis? Didn't she go to table tennis? Didn't she? And it's like, yeah, that's the one. So, mate, I want to go back and I want to just start right back when you were a kid, because obviously life as I've known you've always been in a wheelchair. What was it like to walk? Do you remember that?
Yeah, heaps. So I had my accident when I was 13, and I grew up in the southeast suburbs out in Endeavour Hills back when there were probably more cows than people. And really all you did back then was be super active, like razzing around on your bike, playing a ton of different sport, organised or not, and building a ton of cubby houses, spending most of my time up a tree. I don't recall too much time spent indoors, to be really honest. And had great mates to do all of those things with. Was really active within the tennis community out there. So I played a lot of competitive tennis. I think I played one tournament was my first state level tournament was about a month before my accident, and then that weekend before my accident I was playing like Division 1 at a club level, and we just had like big club competitions. And so sport was really, it was a lot of things for me, but it was community. It was a great way to, just kind of be amongst it. And I was kind of good at sport. I was pretty tall and fairly strong, and I had pretty good like awareness of stuff. So when all of those things kind of fall into place, it's really easy to enjoy sport. I think that's a natural fit. So I loved it, and that's what was kind of almost hilarious is having an accident at a swimming carnival, which swimming's the one thing I'm really shit at. And so it's kind of like this really weird kind of thing where like even that day, like I was so crap at it that I wanted to wag, that's such a 80s word, isn't it? Wag.
Seriously, if you're not wagging today, you're not living.
Right, yeah, because it was so grouse when you wagged. So I wanted to wag, and I was going to do that with my mate, and she flipped out at the last minute and panicked and didn't want to get detention. And so there we go to the swimming carnival, and because I'm such a shit swimmer, but I'm a really good cheerleader, so I became like my team, my homeroom's cheerleader. And hilariously I had this t-shirt that became the pin-up board for like all of the ribbons that my homeroom won. And my homeroom was killer. It had all the best swimmers in it. And so there I am in the back, cheering with all of these ribbons, first, second, third, just killing it, looking like I've won all of these things, but not just, in fact, I didn't win a single one of them, but really loud cheering, mega supportive. And I actually remember like all of the rest of my mates who really also didn't care about swimming and had all kind of were ready to go probably have a fag in the on the oval. And I was like, no, I'm just going to wait because, one of my mates is swimming. And so stuck around for the last swim. And I remember the gun going off and there was this crash. It was just like a massive just cacophony of sound. And all I recall is kind of being pinned down under a 2 meter by 2 meter brick wall and just looking down at my legs and looking to and touching them, and they didn't feel like mine, and they were just it was a pretty surreal moment, and all I could hear was just people screaming, everyone freaking out, lots of stuff. There were like 300 kids there that day. And I guess that's the point that you make, Don, is like people remember it because it was such a massive thing here in Victoria anyway. It was a pretty big thing, and it was in the papers for a really long time. And we had 30 kids go to hospital. Fortunately, I was like the only one like really injured. I was the only one that didn't walk away from that. But I remember, like, you know, leading into that, I was also a bit of a geek. While I was totally into sport, I wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to cut people up and fix them. And so I had this kind of weird semi amount of knowledge about the human body. So when the ambos came and I couldn't feel anything from my waist down, I couldn't move anything, I said to them, "Oh, do you think it's like, you know, do you think I've got a spinal injury or just spinal shock?" And they're like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, what? I don't know, kid. Can we get a fucking X-ray? We'll let you know. Like, so yeah, so that was pretty hilarious. And in the first thing that kind of happened, obviously, was being airlifted to Dandenong Hospital, and they wanted to cut off my my bathers, and they were like my favorite. And I'm like, "There's no way you're cutting my bathers off me." And so there I am, just like, I don't know. I think it set the tone for the next 4 months, really, of me in hospital, and the kind of pig-headed, stubborn and determination that was kind of going to follow for the rest of my life.
Now, you raised a couple of really, really awesome points. Is one, you know, what was to come of your life based on your stubbornness. But one thing you said that got my attention, and for me, it sums you up. You said, "Fortunately, I was the only one who didn't walk away." Like, that is a bizarre thing for anyone listening to hear you say, "Fortunately." Like, can you just give us a bit of insight as to that way of thinking?
It was fortunate. I mean, you know, like I was fortunate. I'm fortunate. I'm so fortunate. Like, that could have been a very different scenario. You know, I could have been sitting up straighter. I could have easily not survived at all. I'm glad it was me. Like, I feel like I was equipped to deal with it. You know, I felt like even kind of going into hospital, I knew I was okay. Like, I knew I was going to be all right. And I could see that there was a lot of trauma going on. You know, my parents weren't okay. My family was not okay. Like, there were so many people around me that were understandably really shocked and angered and confused and, just completely traumatized by the experience. And while that's really important, like there's room for all of those things, I just didn't see them as particularly useful to me. Like, and maybe it's an age, you know, maybe it was being 13, and maybe it was just about, you know, there's a flexibility in your being, you know, you're able to kind of move a bit fluidly through life, maybe, I'm not sure. But I still had a really clear idea of what I wanted my life to be like and where I wanted to go. So it wasn't as if I had no idea. It was just what's in front of me and what can I do, and what, you know, as an athlete, we talk about controlling the controllables, but I was already doing those things as a kid. It's like, well, I can't change that. But what I can do is, you know, get out of this hospital bed, and I can get fit, and I can get strong, and I can, you know, live an independent life. And I was super fortunate to have some really great people to kind of show me what was possible. I mean, at that point in hospital, I'd not met anyone with a disability. The only person I'd ever seen in a wheelchair was old people, or and so I didn't have a perception around what life could or couldn't be. So that's probably helpful. And sport was really, you know, I met Sandy Blythe. So, you know, he was my recreational officer at the time. Sandy is just a superstar of Paralympic movement in this country, co-captain the Australian Paralympic team in Sydney, and co-captain of the Rollers, the wheelchair basketball team that won gold medal. Like, he was my mentor from the age of 13. And you know, I remember, you know, he kind of put to me that life is what you make of it. And that resonated 100%. Like, I really got that. And, you know, even in hospital as a 13-year-old, I was meant to go to the children's ward for rehab. But when I went to the children's ward, they weren't rehabbing anyone. It was just babying these kids. And I was like, that's not the life I'm looking for. And, you know, in Sandy, I found an advocate who wanted me to be an independent human, who wanted me to get the most out of my life. So I'm super fortunate. Like, I had incredible support from my family and friends, but I also had incredible support on the inside from guys like Sandy who knew what was possible if I was up for the task. And I was fully up for it, because what a blessing to have a life. You know, I haven't always thought like that. There are times where, you know, it's not, I haven't been so celebratory of this human existence, but for the most part, how lucky are we? And this is my opportunity, and I'm glad that happened to me, because some incredible things were learnt, and I continue to experience really great things.
And Danni, Sandy's no longer with us, and anyone who knew Sandy would know that he was an incredible leader. Obviously, you know, co-captain of the Sydney Games team, the rollers, that type of stuff. Like an awesome bloke to be around. I really enjoyed his company. I can tell you now that he would be absolutely looking upon what you have become with your life, and he'd be bloody beating his chest, and you know, he'd be so proud, because it's funny when you invest time into somebody, and you do it. I see you do it day in, day out in your role with the Australian team. When we got to travel around this great state in Victoria, going to schools and into prisons and all that sort of stuff, and we'll talk about that. You're just constantly giving, and I love the fact that you don't make it about you. It's about how you can help other people. So, mate, have you, thinking about it now, you were almost sounding like you were destined to have a path to track in sport. Like, was it a challenge for you? Obviously, Sandy being a basketballer, did you have a crack at that? Were you shit at it? Or no, your swimming wasn't your thing? Like, how did you end up becoming the greatest tennis player known to man?
Well, I don't know about that. I think Esther Vigier probably gets that one, but thank you. That's really kind of you to suggest it.
I might be a tiny bit
I'll
biased.
Take that. Yeah. No, I'll take that. Yeah, I guess there's a few things there. Like sport, I love sport, but it was never, you know, I just wanted to be a surgeon. So I knew that sport was a great thing, but it wasn't, I didn't feel like it was a professional space for me to be in. So sport's always been a great place to meet myself. And that's what I love about sport. It's an arena that's, there's nothing like that. You're just so exposed, you know. So now I can't remember your question.
Mate, neither can I. It's not important.
No.
But what I did want to know is the transition into tennis, like obviously around these different sports.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a total brain fade. So yeah, and I think when you have a spinal cord injury, like the first thing that you get told is what you can't do, what you'll never be able to do again, what you're going to have to relearn to do. And while you're taking that in, so is everyone else around you. And it's a very, it's dehumanizing in many ways. It can strip you of so many things. And I understand exactly why it's a really difficult time for people. And I guess that's why sport and the opportunity to have some sort of control of your environment becomes a really important one. So for me as an athlete, kind of using sport within rehab to kind of explore what I can do, you know, what's possible was really super important. And then having Sandy, who's kind of being that perfect role model, he just really encouraged me to do that. But it wasn't easy. Like the first time I picked up a tennis racket was actually in hospital. I had a brace like from neck down into my hips. Like it was horrible. It was a shit experience and I hated every minute of it. But it kind of shone a light on there's an avenue for me, and there's an arena that I can actually start exploring that is actually pretty fun. And so 2 months after I was discharged, I played a tournament, and it was like the nationals, and I got to just see and meet a whole ton of people who, you know, were having all these incredible experiences as people with disability, incredibly diverse people, different ages, different disabilities, going about life in different ways. It looked so many different ways, and people having jobs and driving cars and having relationships and having like great meaningful lives. And I just felt like, oh man, like everything's available to me. And you know, I remember even my first international event was the next year, and I played basketball internationally and tennis at the same event. It was the Fesbic Games. Were you there? The one in Japan, eh?
No, I didn't do Japan. I didn't do Japan. I did the next one. So
right. So well, that was my first international. Was as
tick
a
all the boxes.
Right, like as a 14-year-old or 15, maybe. I was 14. going to Japan as my first international, and it was first time representing Australia in 2 different sports. And what became really evident was that tennis was kind of my thing, and it's a sport I understood, and I kind of felt like if I can't beat someone in a wheelchair, then I'm shit. So it was kind of like it was an easy place, you know. And I think that's the other thing, is that I got the wins early, and I think that's kind of, it's easier to put your energy in places that you're kind of a bit rewarded a bit quickly. So I'm sure I could have been a better basketballer, but I'm probably a bit better suited to an individual sport as well. And and then that kind of took me onto the tour for the next 20, 30 years almost.
You fantastic on the single side of thing on the tennis court. You've obviously had a lot of success in doubles as well. When did that transition sort of come in? You sort of go, you know what, I want to partner up with someone here, because I'd imagine that brings in a whole bunch of different challenges as well.
It does, but it also brings in a ton of different opportunities. Like doubles is actually my favorite. Like, so as a kid growing up, playing for the clubs, doubles was actually the place that I loved the most. I think doubles for me, you know, sport is and tennis in particular, and now table tennis to a degree, even though I'm not quite as proficient, but I see where it's going. It's such a creative sport, you know, and that's what I love, when you're actually a master of a technical skill, but you're able to apply it in a really super creative way. And so for me, singles becomes a bit more prescriptive. Like you have to actually, you know, work with the person that you're playing against. And sometimes it's quite narrow and you can't always explore all the stuff that you love about tennis. But doubles, you explore all of it. And for me, you know, my game was all around serve and volley. Like as a kid, you know, Edberg and Navratilova were like my heroes. And so when I started playing wheelchair tennis, everyone's like, nah, no one in a wheelchair volleys. I'm like, how boring and shit is that? So, you know, kind of me bringing that into my game, and then finally finding a coach that really wanted to explore that with me. And that's what took me to number 1. But at the same time, I was number 1 in doubles. And so much of that was bringing all the things that I love to the sport and sharing it with someone, which is for me the greatest journey. Like sport's such an isolating space, and elite sport is pretty intense. Like you might have your own little pot of people around you, but for the most part, it's pretty lonely, and it's a long time on the road, and you're away from family and friends. And I've missed more big occasions than I can remember. And so when you find a good doubles partner and you're able to really explore that is super enjoyable, and still was some of my favorite moments of my whole sporting career.
And Danni, we know tennis players as filthy rich, spoiled brats. Like, did you load up like wheelchair tennis? Is it the big checks? Is it what we think it is? Or is
well, maybe it is
that?
nowadays. Like, so now wheelchair tennis is at all the Grand Slams. So that's the US Open, Roland Garros, Wimbledon, and obviously the Australian Open. So, and that's where the cash is. So definitely, as a tennis player, and even 20 years ago, I was making enough money to be able to fund my sport. Like, and that's unbelievable, you know. So, and getting to number 1, again, opens up a few doors where people kind of want to support you. And I was always really grateful to kind of have people want to support that and jump on board. And that's been really great. I wouldn't say that I've ever been like rolling around in it. I've only ever made enough money to just pay for my sport and pay for what I do. Because at the end of the day, I've always paid coaches and like gear and all kinds of stuff. So maybe it's a bit different now. But certainly if you're winning Grand Slams now, the dollars are pretty good. Which is a real difference to table tennis. There's like there's no money, so that's a very different world. But I think tennis was probably one of the first ones where prize money was available to you. Like you genuinely were able to kind of make a bit of a living, and there was a real opportunity to do that, which was a bit of a nice little icing on that cake.
Now, speaking of living, you said you wanted to become a surgeon. You took that a bit far and you become you studied Chinese medicine. Like, tell us about that, because that is, that's a whole new ball game from, I can't imagine right now thinking, Kyrgios or one of those tennis players going, actually, I want to apply myself to medicine, one of the hardest things on the planet. So can you give us a bit of thinking into that?
Yeah, look, sport. Do you remember the MLC program? Okay, so we were on that, junior sports program. Incredible. Like, this was a program that invested in young athletes, parasport or otherwise. And I think in the early days, I got very quickly that I was an injury away from retirement. Like, and for me, it's always been really important to be studying, and I always had intentions of either doing medicine in one way or another, or and then quickly that turned to psychology. So I mean, that's a different kind of conversation. But like originally, I wanted to become a neurosurgeon, so it was kind of like how to be of service, and then it was like, well, if I can't cut people's brains up, then maybe I can kind of work with them in a different way. So that was probably
we got here, JT.
Right. How sicko. So that was kind of like the first instance of how to be able to help, how to be able to, help people going through stuff, and so doing those things at the same time was always really important. So even at number one, I was still studying, I was still traveling and training and doing all those things, and working. I've always worked. So, and I'm a bit bored by just sport. Like I can't just do that. It doesn't kind of suit me. Like I think I probably would have been maybe number one for a bit longer had I have just committed wholeheartedly, but I don't think I would have been as happy. And so for me, always knowing that there's something that I can fall back on that's really that at least is a benefit or providing some sort of benefit, just made me feel like I'm not a total selfish prick. So that was kind of nice, because that's what you feel a bit as an athlete. You're so self-absorbed, and you kind of have to be, because it takes all of your effort and all of your attention, and whether you're paid or not, you're a full-time athlete. And so I think that's probably been the biggest challenge, is to kind of manage being a full-time athlete while being a full-time student or working in the field. And so kind of working within mental health is probably where you and I spend a lot of time, and even in the prisons and the juvie justice system, it's like working with kids there became really evident that it's one thing to be able to speak to kids, but then it's another thing to kind of assist them on another level. And Chinese Med kind of provided that other element to support people who are looking for their best physical and mental health. And for me, that's all part of the same package. It's like how do you use different tools to kind of get people living their best life?
Danni, I want to just go back quickly to that world number one. I don't get to speak to many ones in my life, so I'm going to make the most of the opportunity. What was that moment like? Because I assume as a sportsman, you aspire to get to that top position. It's probably a huge amount of drive. How do you find out? Does someone give you a phone call? Do you get a letter in the mail? Is it just announced on the internet? And then what's the feeling like when that actually happens?
So, there's a ranking system. So you kind of, what you're chasing, and how far you are off. And so that with whatever, this win becomes world number one. World number one is so funny, because that's not necessarily, I think in the early days, and we're talking like late mid-90s, it was never about world number one, but it definitely was about respecting my time on the court. Like I think it was really easy in the early days to give 70% and be okay with a 70% outcome. But I kind of got to a point where, in fact, it was my dad's passing. So my dad died not long after the Atlanta Paralympic Games. And it asked me very much to reflect on why I do what I do. And if I'm going to do this, then I have to give, I don't know why I'm talented at tennis, but to give that respect rather than just shit on it a little bit, and just not, it's not so much about being proud, but it is about just, giving it the respect it deserved. And that meant giving everything to it regardless of the outcome. So that was a really different mindset, I guess, because I think often you just kind of, in the past, it was really easy for me to not do that and be okay with being number 2 or 3 in the world, and kind of not so much about having excuses, but just being okay with that, as opposed to just really having a crack and just seeing what I'm able to produce, not for the end result, but just to feel like I'm giving myself wholeheartedly to it. And so that's kind of what happened. That year that my dad passed, I was kind of on the verge of number one. So you kind of knew what was coming, and then I had to kind of back off. But then I had to wait another year for that to happen. And it was actually the last tournament of the year. And it's so satisfying, because that last tournament of the year, at this tournament, I have to get to this point and win this tournament. It was the US Open. And it was kind of like, I don't know, that's so satisfying when you aim for something and you get it, and the whole world is trying to get it too. And this was at a time where six women could win any tournament. It was incredibly well contested. Everyone's level was amazing, and to kind of be able to do that was an extraordinary time, and I was actually quite proud of that. And be able to back that up is a whole other thing. You know, it's one thing to get to number one, and it's another thing to stay there, and that's brutal. Like, yeah, that's really brutal. Because sport, you know, it's not like you go into a gig and everyone's cheering you on. It's like people want to fuck you up, and they will do all kinds of things to do that. And I don't know that I was quite prepared for that. Like, I felt like as a young person, I kind of probably took a bit of that personally, and I didn't really know how to manage that very well. But definitely, you know, getting to the end of that second number one and being able to hold that, I was pretty exhausted by it. And it's relentless. You know, in Australia, I think I had about a week off a year. I didn't have a winter for 15 years in a row. It's pretty draining, and it asks a lot of you. And I got to probably about just under 3 years of number one. I lost the number one position just before the Sydney Paralympic Games, actually. So, but yeah, you know what's coming, and it was a celebration. Like, the team that I had around me were extraordinary. You know, I was kind of working with acupuncturists, my trainer, I had my chiro, I had my coach, and all these people that were in my little bubble. It was a really proud moment for all of us, because you can't do this stuff by yourself. And I certainly couldn't have done this without people really embracing me and how I go about my business, and celebrating that, but also encouraging me to do that. And that's kind of where that was the beauty of that. And to this day, I'm still really proud of that. And I still have incredible gratitude to all those people who helped make that happen.
Danni, some of the moments that I recall, you know, obviously heading out the bush to speak with you, going to juvie, you know, those sort of places, and it's the conversations that we have when we're waiting to do a gig or waiting to, you know, and it's that bit where you go, that's the essence of that human, you know, that's what makes them up. And I've always loved that from the moment we met. There was always I'm gonna die trying. I'm not just gonna waste a life, and I've taken personally so much from that. So personally, I want to say thank you for filling me, for, you know, for absolutely having an abundance of you to give to other people, because I'm not the only person who walks away from an interaction with you feeling bloody awesome and wanting to do more with their life. I know that it is a contagious effort that happens. I want to talk about also the moment, like, we both won bronzes, and you were the one that actually helped me put things in context. We were on a bus and we talked about the fact that, you know what, we've won a bronze, but we'll be able to see tomorrow. You know, when we're looking at a guy who couldn't see, and, you know, having those conversations, and you may not remember those ones, but they're moments where you've been able to put shit in perspective really, really quickly. Even though you're hurting, you still make really good sense of the world around you. Has that, and obviously that happened when you were a kid, the accident, it's something that's gone with you for your entire life. The sport, is there a moment, one medal, one trophy, obviously you talked of reaching number one. I get the sense that number one was an awesome thing, but there's probably a medal or another achievement along the way that is up there with significance for you. Is there a time in life or a sport accolade that just means the world?
Firstly, thank you for all those really kind words. That's really very sweet of you. I feel like that's just a mirror. Like, you do the exact same thing. You know, the times that you and I have spent, like when I've had those down days and, you know, kind of needed a little bit of positivity in my world, you've been those things for me. So those times were really vital and valuable for me as well. So thank you for being that for me also. Right. Yes, absolutely. And there's lots of them. And I think if I have to just pick one, and I feel like I'm going to sound like a total wanker, but
go so for it. JT does that like every other episode.
No, but so, you know, Wimbledon was one of the last bastions of the women wheelchair tennis players not being allowed. Like, it was one of the last places that for women wheelchair tennis players, we were so far from it. You know, the men had been playing there for a while, and the All England club make their own calls on pretty much everything. So it took a really long time. But the first time women were allowed there, I was there, and it was a doubles. So we only played a doubles event. Now it's singles and doubles, and quads are there as well. And so they've really come on board in a really amazing way, as have all the Grand Slams. So that's embedded now everywhere. But that first time was amazing. You know, it was kind of like, I remember being, so I was on court 4 looking up at the All England, like it's just this thing that I used to watch as a kid, you know, watching Martina Navratilova win that, watching her lose that to Steffi Graf and being like absolutely heartbroken for her as a kid, and just kind of seeing this place as the holy grail of sport that I'd love to watch. And there I am on this court in white, like that never happens, and in a skirt, never happens, playing with my doubles partner for the first time, women being allowed. I was really taken by the fact that I'm here because of every single woman that's ever gone before me. And I feel like I really brought all of them with me onto that court. Like every single one of them was there with me. And that's the whole thing. It takes all of us to move it forward, to push it in a better place, to bring awareness and bring just knowledge and understanding and compassion and care. And it takes all of us to keep pushing it forward. And you're rarely pushing it forward for yourself. You're pushing it forward so that the people coming next can then push it forward next. It's kind of like, I was really mindful and grateful. And we didn't win that match, but it was a huge step for the movement. It was a huge step for awareness. It was a huge step for gratitude to every single person who's ever put any time and effort into me, and particularly the women that I looked up to as wheelchair tennis players. Like to this day, that's still one of my most, I don't know, my most moving memories.
Awesome. Now, Danni, I'm very mindful of how much time we've taken of yours. You have been ridiculously grateful. I hit you up and I said, mate, can you join us? You didn't tell me to piss off, which I was really surprised about. A lot. Here you are with us. So we're going to wrap this up because I am very respectful of your time that you've given us. Now, mate, before we go, I want to say that the going forward, like 6 Paralympics, like seriously, are you just taking the piss? Like that is, have you got a retirement in mind, or are you just going to keep on rolling and just make me look like a real dick?
Oh, I don't know, man. Like I found a sport that my body is actually really happy to do. Like, so tennis is brutal. It's physical. It's being on the road, you know, months and months. And I think that was the end time. That was a right time to finish that sport. But I found another sport that is challenging me on so many levels. It is exciting. It is really difficult. I've got great people around me. It's one of those sports that's going to take 10 years for me to be remotely proficient. And because I've kind of gotten to a level at a sport where I know how it feels to be in control and be creative. And that's where the real magic and fun around competition happens. And I'm probably about four years into that 10 years. So I want to get good at this. I want to be able to experience that kind of love and joy of the battle and the creative kind of component that it creates. Like I want that. So if I'm well enough, then that's great. I'm in the right place, and I've definitely got the right people around me. So, Tokyo goes ahead. That'll be 7 Paralympic Games. And I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a very different experience, but all things are looking like that's going to go ahead. And I don't know. Libby Kosmala had 12 Paralympic Games in her. She retired when she was 75 as the oldest Paralympian in the whole village in Rio. I don't quite think I've got that, but it's there are a lot of wheelchair table tennis players who are still competing at a super high level. I feel like this is a sport where you get better as you get older. Your feel for the sport and your awareness of the sport goes a long way. You don't have to necessarily be. You don't have to run around. You don't have to be the fastest person, but there's definitely that more that comes with experience, and I'm looking forward to what that might look like.
Well, mate, you make table tennis sexy. You certainly make it a very attractive proposition when you say you don't have to run around. Like, you had me at hello for that. But my advice is, you said you're 4 years into a 10-year plan. My advice for the kids listening, if you're thinking of taking up table tennis, come back in 6 years. Don't even consider it. When Danni says she wants to get good at something, she's going to get good at something. And it's bloody awesome to hear that. Mate, thank you so much for your time. It is an understatement how grateful we are for you to be here with us today. It's bloody awesome. So Danni Di Toro, you're a bloody legend. Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. And it's really great to have a chat. I feel really blessed to have you in my life, and great work, you two. This is really awesome.
Thanks for joining us, Danni. All the best.